Hey guys, it's pretty late at night and I am back with a video where I was essentially writing, right? And I was working on my premise and themes. So when I was really looking into my MC and my protagonist, I came up with certain points which I think would make for certain things that are necessary if you really want your main character to stand out. And after a lot of trial and error, I have a list of things that I think are absolutely essential for your main character to stand out. And now today I'm going to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about these with examples from my favorite shows and my favorite characters personally, and I'm going to get into it from there. So, to start with, the most important things that you should look for in your main character, that should, first of all, is they should be the triangle connection. Now, you have a character, you have the setting, and you have the plot. These three are interconnected. You need a character who is deeply invested in this whole thing. These three together make the theme. So, your character needs to be in the setting, in the plot, in the theme. It's like without them, the whole thing falls apart. That's how involved your character should be in this. Secondly, they need to be consistent. Your protagonist needs to act in character. They cannot change their moral values in between or without good reason. They need to stay consistent to themselves because they essentially describe your entire plot. They need to be rational, obviously, and they need to have their own distinct voice that stands out. Now, your main character is what defines your story. So, they really need to be different from everyone else in your book. And there should be something special about their relationship dynamics. I have made notes, so I'm referring to them. There should be something different about their relationship dynamics. It's something that should stand out, and I think it'll be better if I explain it using examples. So let's get into the examples and get a clearer understanding of what makes a main character really stand out and what makes for a good protagonist. So let's get into it. After recording the entire video, I realized when I talked about Dean's relationship to the plot, I could have worded it better. I just get a little excited when I'm talking about this and I tend to ramble. So I'm just going to make this part a little more concise so that you guys can understand what I'm trying to say. Now, what we really need to focus on is the fact that Dean drives the narrative single-handedly. Without Dean's character arc, there is no other character arc. Even though Sam is supposedly the another protagonist in the show, his arc is non-existent without Dean because Dean is what drags him into the family business to begin with. So, and he's also the one who makes a lot of the major decisions on the show. It could be selling his soul to save his brother, bearing the mark of Cain, agreeing to become a vessel. All of the major decisions are made by Dean on the show. And it's not just about what he does. It's about his reactions, not just his actions. Because every major plot twist will either break Dean, will be caused by Dean, or it will force him to evolve in some way, shape, or form. And every time Dean evolves, it directly affects the plot of the show. So let's talk about the apocalypse, for example, which is one of the most well-known arcs of the show. The most popular ones is the apocalypse. And who caused it? Dean is the one who broke the first seal. He is the one who caused the apocalypse. So when we look at Dean in Supernatural, that is exactly what you want for your protagonist when you're writing your book. Because what happens a lot of times is that our own protagonist becomes like a passive viewer of events unfolding before them. That is a mistake that you want to avoid because I have made that myself. The plot itself becomes so interesting, but our protagonist is not really involved in it. But Supernatural can literally not exist without Dean Winchester. When he dies, the show ends. That's it. That's how it works. So that is the kind of importance you need to give your protagonist when you're writing a book or when you're writing anything. So now that we have talked about Dean's connection to the plot, we'll get into Dean's connection to the setting. We'll start this by discussing what is the setting of Supernatural. What is the setting of Supernatural? It's essentially American horror. You have cheap motels, broken diners, neon signs, rural towns. That's the setting of Supernatural at the very basis of it. And Dean really embodies it in the way he carries himself. His Impala, his leather jacket, listening to AC/DC, his food habits, everything. All of it just embodies that, right? Now, even he also embodies the rules of this world. What are the rules of this world? Dean's most famous line, saving people, hunting things, the family business. He really embodies that. It's all about, there's no room for emotions. You fight shit. He's morally gray. He deals with constant loss. It's more about, doing immoral things, but for the greater good. So if this were a theme, it would be I can see all sides, because again, this is something that a terrorist could use to, justify their actions. It's for the greater good. But in Dean's case, it is for the greater good, for real. So that checks out. But not only does he embody his setting, he also challenges his setting. Because even though he's all about, no emotions, no nothing, just hunting, there's a huge found family aspect to Dean's life. His own family was never really there for him, but he found family in other people that he met while hunting. For example, Bobby or Castiel or Jody. Now, all these people, even though it's against the core rules of his setting to have emotional attachments or investments, he still does. So he contradicts his own setting. He pushes against it himself, because in his world it's a weakness to have emotional connections, because monsters or demons, whatever's hunting him, could use it against him, but he still does have those. So not only does he embody his setting, he also pushes against it at the same time, which adds this another layer of complexity to his character, which is what, in my opinion, makes him one of the best fictional protagonists in fantasy genre. I mean, I have other protagonists to talk about too, but that is what makes him one of my favorite ones. Dean Winchester, in one line, is the human face of a cosmic conflict. All the themes of the show, free will versus fate, family, sacrifice, identity, redemption, all of them, they're embodied in Dean Winchester. He is a son who is forged by duty, but he's also a brother who always sacrifices first. He is torn between his obedience to his father and to heaven and rebellion, which is essentially his loyalty to his own personal moral code and to his family. So at that point, it's like he is forcing the audience to really ask themselves this one question. What happens when a man who is supposed to be a divine weapon refuses to be used as one? What happens then? What makes Dean special is that he's not just a part of the setting or the plot or the triangle. He cements it. There is no plot without him. He's irreplaceable, yet he's complex. So this is what, in my opinion, makes him one of the best fictional characters in fantasy genre. I mean, the absolute layers and complexity to him is very well written. He's a very, very well written fictional character, and I think and he really resonates with a lot of different people. So that was about Dean Winchester. Let's get into our next fictional character. Now, if we are talking about good fictional characters, it would be an absolute crime not to mention Geralt of Rivia. So first I want to discuss his relation to the plot of The Witcher. Now, Geralt is not the one who drives the plot. He's the one who anchors it, who makes it feel more grounded. Because when we explore fantasy as a genre, it's generally that there's a lot of chaos caused by the MC, but in Geralt's case, he arrives and the chaos is already there. It could be kings that are warring, or mages that are scheming, or monsters that are killing, and Geralt is just in the middle of it all. And he's just kind of trying to make sense of stuff. And even when he tries to be neutral, he quite literally cannot, because there's always a curveball that is being thrown at him. So, if you had to define Geralt, you could basically say that he's not the fuse, he's the sword that is stuck in the middle of the blast. He's like a reluctant linchpin. Because think about it, right? The law of surprise that kind of binds Ciri's fate to Geralt, or his single decision to spare Renfrey that causes this whole philosophical domino effect, or his romantic relationship with Yennefer that causes a lot of magical politics. Everything that Geralt does is just like, even when he is trying to make the right choice, it inadvertently causes chaos, and he just finds himself in the middle of it, trying to look for a middle ground, trying to anchor everything. That is the best way and the most concise manner in which I can define Geralt's relationship to the plot of The Witcher. So now let's talk about the setting of The Witcher. It's a continent that is scarred, jaded, and yet it is beautiful. It is not some noble fantasy land. No, it is dangerous, it is morally ambiguous, and it's tribal. And Witcher embodies that. When we start with his mutations, which is basically children being turned into weapons, directly reflects his setting. Or his Witcher neutrality, which is kind of his way to deal with the constantly shifting politics of the continent that he lives in. Or it could be his loner status, which mirrors the fragmented tribal state of his continent. So he perfectly embodies the Witcher setting, but at the same time, he challenges it. How does he do that? Like Dean challenges his setting in Supernatural, Geralt challenges his setting in The Witcher, because his world tells him not to care and not to get involved. And even though he says that he won't, we constantly find that he ends up risking everything for this girl that he was supposedly not supposed to love, or for a mage that he cannot let go of. So even though Witcher's setting is what makes him, or what builds him, his empathy for other characters that he interacts with is what makes him dangerous to the setting, is what makes him contradict the setting. Exactly how we see Dean contradict the setting of Supernatural. This is the one common link between these two characters which makes them both so great. So the theme of the Witcher universe is essentially asks us three very important questions. What does it mean to be a monster or a man? Is neutrality ever truly possible? And what is the cost for choice and destiny? The Witcher, or Geralt's character, forces us to face some uncomfortable truths. To start with, even though he is lesser by design, he still has a better moral compass than most human beings. He chooses mercy in a world that thrives on cruelty, and his constant identity crisis. Is he a father or a killer? Is he a man or a monster? So The Witcher really reflects on the sense of agency through Geralt, where he constantly tries to deny his fate, but the story keeps on circling back to the fact that he is important. He's important to the plot, he's important to the prophecies, he is important. So that's when we really understand agency on a deeper level. So Geralt is like a heartbeat of this really violent universe that thrives on chaos, and he somehow is walking this really thin line between neutrality and absolute fucking annihilation, which again is kind of very similar to Dean, which is what, like, the complexity and layers and the way these characters challenge their own setting is what makes them so special and really makes them stand out. Now, if you guys remember, in the beginning of the video, I discussed the triangle connection, I discussed character arcs, and I basically discussed consistency of a character or their moral values. I discussed all of these things which I think make for a really strong protagonist, and the best way I could have explained what really makes a protagonist stand out is by giving you guys examples, which is why I chose, which I think personally are two of the best protagonists in fantasy, to, kind of to help you guys understand what I mean when I say that your character should connect deeply with the triangle. This is what I mean when I say your character should deeply be involved in the triangle. So I hope this video was helpful, and I hope you guys were able to understand what I communicated. I also wanted to add Percy Jackson to this video, but I think I would make a different video for Percy Jackson. I basically grew up reading Percy Jackson books, so I think I would have a lot to talk about Percy. He's definitely a positive character arc, and Geralt, I could say, I would actually say his character arc is pretty flat. So I could get into detail about that some other time, but for this video, this is it, and I really hope this helped you with whatever that you're writing.